Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of 5 Elements of Success Player Development Series. I'm Roger Nick, your host and founder of Junior Golf Hub. We got a great show for you this week talking about off-season, the efficiency of mind and body and training in the off-season. So really excited about getting into that. So many of you around the country are getting into your off-season, or maybe you don't have an off-season and maybe you should. So we're going to talk about that in this episode. So before we get started, I want to make sure you get your comments, questions, and concerns into 5 Elements at the Golf Performance Center. We want to hear from you. Our YouTube chat, make sure you're sending those in so we can help you reach your goals on and off the golf course. All right, as we get started, I want to talk about the PDI, the Self Assessment. If you haven't downloaded the app, the Junior Golf Hub app, please download the Junior Golf Hub app. Take that new PDI Self Assessment, find out where you are, and so you can get maybe some goals reached this off season and maybe for next year as well. So find out where you are in this process and that journey to college golf. So get that PDI assessment done so we can help you out. Tyler Campbell to my left here, Director of Performance here, is always our co-host. This week we have Dr. Kate Campbell. Welcome in, Dr. Kate Campbell, the physical therapist here at Golf Performance Center. So we're really excited about talking to you guys, again, about the mind and body and efficient off-season workouts. So before we get to that, we need to talk about our pop quiz. Why should golf athletes do a physical screen? Let me repeat that. Why should golf athletes do a physical screen? Really important, and we're going to be talking about it in the show. Get those answers in. We're going to have draw your name out of the hat, get a chance to win a hat, the Junior Golf Hub hat, on this show. So, answer those questions, and anybody who's at the Golf Performance Center should know that answer. So make sure you get those answers in. Anyway, Tyler, before we get into this week's show, what did we talk about last week?
Yeah, so last week, guys, we had Rick Dowling from the Junior Golf Hub on the show, as well as a few other guests we'll get to shortly. We were talking about the current state of junior golf. Obviously, with the pandemic that we've all been dealing with, the traditional summer of junior golf has been affected, and how tournaments are operated has been affected. The college recruiting process has been affected. So this show just gave us a good update on the current status of all of those situations. We were excited to have the AJGA on the show.
Yeah,
Patrick Plank to again give us some insight about how they're dealing with the current state of the game. And we also had Jackson Roman, who was the champion, the winner of the Junior Golf Hub Championship last year. Again, congratulations to him on verbally committing to Loyola. We were excited to hear what he had to say about his junior golf journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for the update, Tyler. And again, congratulations to Jackson Roman on the Junior Golf Hub win this past summer. So congrats on that, and also your selection of Loyola, Maryland. So again, this week we're talking about the mind and physical, efficient workout on the off season, if you will. And Dr. Kate, let's talk about where we start, right? And I like the word prehab. And I know a lot of young athletes and parents out there may not understand what that is right now, but we talk about it a lot. The first order of business is really trying to avoid injuries. So
yes.
Talk about prehab.
Prevention is the best medicine. It would make my job a whole lot easier if we could prevent these things from happening. We can heal a little bit better than waiting for things to occur. So prehab, pre-rehabilitation. We want to before rehabilitate. So how do we know what to rehabilitate? We have to measure and take our baselines and find some of those issues and then identify them. And we might have workouts for kids and we could just assume all these kids need the same thing, but every kid, every athlete still has their individual needs, different joints, different flexibilities, different past medical history that may lead us down to who needs to rehabilitate what and how.
Yeah, and that's really important, because I think that's something that I think a lot of our audience out there may not really understand. But Tyler, we're in that process right now. Obviously we've gone through the golf season. We're going into our what we call our off season.
Yep.
And you do screening and things like that for the physical side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really pride ourselves on our evaluation process and the assessment processes that we have here. Obviously through the Junior Golf Hub, you've got your PDI Self Assessment. Go get your coach guided assessment at a PDI certified coach in your area. And then lastly, keep an eye out for our college prep series events where you can go through the full tournament PDI and really get that player development index. It's going to give you some feedback as to where you are on your journey of junior golf development and are you on track to reach your goals. So what we just took our juniors through here was essentially that full PDI assessment. So they went through physical proficiencies and a functional movement screen to see where they stand. And again, we talk about function dictates form. They took their golf golf assessment or golf skills test. And then we take into consideration their tournament performance as well. And that gives us a baseline. Again, a baseline. Why do we want to assess? Why do we want to screen going into the offseason? We need a baseline to have an idea of what we need to be working on and where we need to be spending our time as the weather changes.
Yeah, and again, we're going back to why we assess, right? So we're not guessing of what might be happening or what we need to do. It's really, again, making sure that you have knowledge to, as what, Kate, you were just saying, of what you need to do individually, and not what you're doing just kind of in a random workout kind of situation where if Tiger's doing this, then I should do this, because unfortunately we see that quite often. I read a magazine or see TV and go on YouTube and this workout is that workout. It doesn't mean it's right for you, because if you don't know where you are, it's no way that you could just be following that blindly, or should you be following that blindly?
Exactly, and if you took it blindly and something was wrong with your swing or something was wrong with your technique in the gym, that could predispose you to injury. So that needs to be addressed.
We talk about that which can be measured can be improved, right? And we believe that wholeheartedly. I think Bryson backed that up last week at the U.S. Open, or 2 weeks ago now. Time's flying, but. We really like to measure and quantify improvement beyond just scoring average.
Yeah, well, understanding that in a way that, again, starting with the idea of long-term development, is really important, right? Because again, young, junior golfers are athletes, or maybe they're aspiring athletes, but they still need to move well, and they still need to have to understand, or parents need to understand that they're loading themselves. They're maybe jumping off the sidewall on the driveway. That's plyometrics, right?
Yep.
I mean, they're loading. So understanding that it's okay to load and kind of learning, but it is that adaptation, process, if we will, over time that really matters. So, Kate, why don't you talk about that?
Let's go back, dive in a little bit from the medical background. Adaptation. So you have your athletes who are growing up, and their bones grow. And bone density is changing. In fact, this is the time to be loading your athletes, because at 18, boys' bone mass peaks, and 18 for females and 20 for men. That's it. It's downhill from there. So this is the time. Now you have a longer bone. Now everything's tight because the muscle got stretched out like a rubber band. So this is the time to do some flexibility training and joint movement and stretching, because you have to send signals to the muscle, hey, get used to this new length, time to grow, time to change. Then as they're growing, they need to get deeper, more muscle fiber to hold that contraction. So making them stronger and thicker, and we're talking about hypertrophy. But just because they're stronger or looser doesn't mean they're going to fire quickly, or when they need to, or turn off quickly. And that comes from the neuromuscular system, and we have to train that different ways too. And that's where we use our plyometric and power, which is a combination of strength and speed. So those trainings are essential to help this athlete grow and adapt properly.
Yeah. So, well, that being said, this kind of made me think about that young athlete going through, the growth spurts, if you will, or peak height velocities, and you look at young athletes and you typically see these kids that look like they're Gumby, right? They can move like crazy. We see this and hear this quite all the time. But it's really when they're their tightest, or almost their tightest, right? Because you've got the bones growing at different rates, muscle is at a different rate, and tissue is changing differently. So it's really getting stretched out as much as it possibly can, which then means it's probably not as flexible or mobile in that standpoint. So they're going to give up mobility for stability in some cases. So how do you work through that, Tyler? And
well, again, I think we start with the FMS. We start with the functional movement screen. That's our first tool in the toolbox to just get an idea of where those asymmetries might be from a mobility or a stability standpoint. It allows us to look at each joint in the body and assess it from kind of a global picture, and just a big picture perspective. And then from there we can attack it, so we talked in past episodes about alternating pattern of stable segments and mobile joints. It's our job first and foremost to keep these athletes healthy, and we have to have a system to do that. And so using that, that alternating pattern, and that's pretty simple way of thinking about it. If that pattern gets thrown off, injury is probably likely to occur in time. So
yeah, and I think maybe the name of the episode of the mind and body may have fooled a few people, because we're talking about mind in this case, the neuromuscular system, right? And not just how we're thinking. It's really how we're connecting and how those synapses are, firing, if you will, in sequential, kind of speed.
Right.
And that's what we need. We want to go from analog to digital, if you will.
Yeah,
right?
we have our mind, this is our brain, but half of it is conscious and half of it is subconscious. And what we need to do to create that reflex is start with the conscious brain and say, oh, I am deficient, I can't fire properly, let me work on this. Maybe you need some visual feedback and use a mirror to work on that posture, or touch and feel the right contraction. Once you can identify that consciously, the repetition comes in and it becomes a little bit more automatic. And we want to turn it into muscle memory so that it happens while you do two things at once, while you move your arms and your legs and move from the ground to quadruped, to high kneeling, to up. And then we have to have the stability while we're doing a very explosive dynamic golf swing.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, earlier in the week, we were working with some athletes and you were doing some active rest work with them. And I came into the room and everybody just looked mentally fatigued. And I think they were thinking really, really hard about connecting the dots neurologically to some of the muscles of the pelvis and some of the, transverse abdominis, some of the areas that we're trying to get them to engage. It's difficult. And getting the brain to talk to those areas is something that takes a lot of practice and can be mentally fatiguing for sure.
And what we're doing there is working on the core. And I think the misconception is that core is like those six-pack abs and they're way up here and they look good. And you can have a 2-minute plank and have a week.
My six-pack going.
You have your six-pack. Tyler has a different six-pack. I think that we have to get away from that rectus abdominis six-pack abs is not the equivalent to a strong core. You can have a strong plank and not activate properly or stabilize during a dynamic movement like the swing.
Yeah, I love that because it goes right into what we say all the time. Fitness isn't performance. And I think a lot of times when we see a lot of players out there, or even parents talking about it, is my kid goes to a personal trainer, they look fit, they got this fitness going on, but they don't really perform well because, again, they probably haven't done the basic thing, which is measuring or getting a baseline with an FMS or some type of screening that says, I have some deficiencies here, or here's my strengths, and what do they work on? And I think that's the most important thing going into an off season is understanding what that is and how to change that. So Tyler, again, you just talked about doing our assessment. We did our player development assessment. And so some of the athletes that you saw, and again, some of them look fit, but what were some of the areas that you saw that were weak that you would assume might be a little different?
Well, again, we've had a little bit of an unconventional end of our academy year. So as I mentioned, we just kicked off our academy year in the last week or so. And ideally, a lot of those kids we had seen last year through the summer months and so forth. Well, with this past, summer being a little unconventional, there were some tests that were some red flags that probably wouldn't have been had they been consistently working on them throughout their season. The hip bridge, the plank. These are some fundamental, basic, exercises that we want to nail, and we're working on getting back to kind of tightening up those standards right now. But I would say those were two that, in particular, that are extremely important with regards to, the core, if you will, making sure that our glutes and midsection are working properly. Those are two that were definitely a little weaker.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the kings and the queens of core, right? And
we get, the glutes are king. Glutes are king. When we talk about the power in the golf swing, the gluteal group is massive and just literally and figuratively in terms of developing power in the golf swing. And then obviously, like we said, the transverse abdominis, those deep abdominal muscles, for supporting the midsection. So.
Right. And those deep abdominal muscles really, Kate, again, let's go back to the neurological side, the core, what that is. Firing those correctly in the proper sequence is kind of the tell-all, if you will, right? Because again, we can do planks, we can do push-ups, but if we're not firing correctly, that says a lot about the system. And then as we go into a golf swing, if you will, so we're taking, our 100% of our body, going through a full golf swing. We're going to use it about 80% of its maximum capacity in 1.1 seconds or less. So that sequential firing means a lot, right, when it comes to an athlete and being able to repeat that without or reducing some injuries, if you will.
Right. So one way to do that is doing your slow motion swing, because you have a stable pelvis at address, but now as you take it back, you constantly have to check in. Again, turning on that conscious brain to think about, what am I doing? Oh, I lost it. Get it again. Another couple degrees. Oh, I lost it. Get it again. And then starting to speed it up, and then starting to connect the dots, and then you can start thinking about, well, where am I going? And it's something different in the brain.
So on the golf side, and I'll talk a little bit about our periodization schedule here in a second, but on the golf side in the off season, they use that time to work on these slow motion mechanics and really bringing awareness and intent to that motion. There's a statistic out there that says essentially a slow motion golf swing, could be upwards of a minute long, is equivalent to about 50 full speed swings. To learn a new motor skill and to learn a new pattern, those slow motion swings are really a lot of bang for your buck. They're not easy.
They're not easy, and again, you're talking about an athlete sweating. I mean, again, kind of that neurological system connecting. It's really important that you're doing those things, because, again, to your point, if I'm not aware of that, then I'm just letting it go, and then if I'm just letting it go, I'm just hitting shots then,
right.
and, making swings with no real intent.
Right.
Which kind of leads us into that whole idea of, off-season really, work. Golf work, we're going to talk next week more about the golf side of this, but this week right now we're talking about the physical side and what it means, right? So if we're going through that process and because avoiding injuries, indoor practice versus outdoor practice on the golf course, going to a driving range when it's cold outside and hitting mats, there's a lot of information out there that says, hey, you hit off mats, you're going to have lots of injuries. I'd like to think of that differently. It's when you hit off mats incorrectly, you're going to have lots of injuries. And I think it's the same thing with a full golf swing. Golf swings aren't bad for you, and they're not bad for your back.
Golf swings are.
But bad golf swings are. So, making sure you have a good golf swing, but you move well, and that's really what it is. I mean, it's not about having a great golf swing that makes you or propels a player to the college level. It's really having a good, functional, efficient golf swing that's going to allow them to do that more practice. Steadier on the golf course, more control.
And we
of the
know
golf
that's
ball.
going to look different for each person. They're similar. The golf swing, if you look at these golf swings, they look very much alike in so many ways.
Well, the equipment is not changing much from one player to the next player, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very similar.
I liked your point about tying in adaptation and healthy swings. We all hear like everything in moderation, even junk food, and a bad swing here or there is probably okay. Yeah. But you do a lot of them, oh boy, you're destined for those overuse injuries. And we know that 82% of the injuries are overuse. The other ones are like acute traumas and things like that. So, but also too much of a good thing, if you haven't progressed properly, it can still be an issue. The FMS helps point out, oh, you're deficient here, you're more likely to get an injury when we add repetition and load. So that gives us a direction to heal and prehab. But you might have an awesome FMS and just get out there from an off season without practice and get injured because of overuse. So too much of a good thing can still be bad.
Yeah, kind of like my Oreos, I guess. I love my Oreos.
So, we talk about a plan. We've taken this all the way back to episode 1. If you haven't seen it, check it out. We talked about developing a plan to reach your goals. So we have a plan on the physical side that we refer to as our periodization schedule. And so throughout the year, this is basically, a roadmap for what we're going to be working on at particular points, throughout the academy year and the golf season. So if we start right now, we're in week 1 or 2 of our junior academy here. We're really in a functional movement focused phase right now. We really want to be focusing on quality movement, getting back to basics, whether the athlete's been with us for 5 years or so, or on our adult case, maybe 12, 15 years.
15,
we're still resetting, getting back to basics, and setting the standard for what's to come in the coming months. Once that movement improves, the movement quality improves, we'll get into a little bit of a strength endurance phase throughout the fall before transitioning into a maximal strength phase in the off season, what we're going to call the off season, the winter months here in the Northeast, where we're not playing golf as often, necessarily competing, I should say. So having the ability to recover from a heavy day in the gym is more sustainable. And then after that maximal strength is gained, then we need to, like you said, connect the dots neurologically and get those muscles to fire as quickly as possible. And that's where our power and speed phase is going to come into play. So typically that takes place between mid to end of January through the beginning of March. We will adjust and ebb and flow based on the weather. If we're having a moderate winter, maybe that'll be moved up a little bit. If the winter's going a little longer, maybe we can spend a little more time in our maximal strength phase. But that power speed phase is critical to getting those muscles to fire quickly and then transitioning that into the motion of the golf swing. before then our season, starts up again in the spring and summer, and we turn into what we call a maintenance phase, where the focus of the workout is a little bit more balanced. It's not necessarily easier. A lot of people think maintenance, it's maintenance. Yes. No, it's definitely not any easier. It's just more balanced across the focus. The emphasis isn't necessarily on power and speed or maximal strength. We're really trying to maintain, stay healthy, and perform at our best in season. So.
Yeah, but it's not forgotten. I mean, again, that balance. So during the season, it's a lot of wear and tear. You still have to maintain some strength and
like
power
I said,
throughout, right?
Yeah, and I feel that athletes this summer, more so than some in the past, kind of neglected that maintenance phase, if you will.
Right, and you're not going to see that on the PGA Tour. These guys are out there, they're making a living at it. Obviously, they're trying to perform at their best the most often they possibly can. So again, staying healthy is important. Staying strong throughout the season is important. And a lot of that comes down to also, really sleep. The rest, what
Hydrate.
we're eating. And so there's other factors to this as well. Again, we're talking about the physical body right now. It's, how do we fuel that body?
You have to be overall healthy to have the environment to have healing and growing and adaptation going on. So if you're not getting sleep, you're not going to grow. If you're not hydrating, if you're not eating the right healthy stuff and the proteins to come and transition into your muscles, we need those proteins to grow. Yeah. I think that periodization, it happens to be around seasons, but the science behind it is like you giving it 2, 4, 6, 12 weeks or so with each.
Sure.
After 2 weeks of doing an exercise, all you've done is increase the neuromuscular connectivity. So things fire faster. Your brain says, "Oh, I know this exercise, and it can do it better."
Right. Yeah.
But it hasn't. So you're stronger because more nerve fibers are firing. Maybe it went from 60% to 80%. Our elite Olympic level athletes can connect like 90% or more of their nerve fibers within a muscle. But it takes 4 weeks for hypertrophy, which means muscle growth.
Right.
Then, if we're especially talking about tendons and ligaments changing, it can take up to 12 weeks. So you need to, if you're out there and you're going to make your own periodization program, really think about, I got to stick with it and continue to progress. And then once you make those gains after 12 weeks, maintaining means don't drop back down.
Right.
Keep it at the same high level so that your body can continue to adapt and stay while you focus on golf.
I would say that consistency is the number one thing to just douse the flame on the whole idea behind this. So if you're not truly committed to this plan and following the system that you've put in place, you have to have realistic expectations, I think is how I would put it.
Well, and we talk a little bit about that skill challenge ratio, the challenge of what it is you're trying to do and where you are. And I think sometimes that's the hard thing out there, I think, for a lot of young players, is also looking in the mirror and being able to go into the, scrutinize what's happening, what am I doing, where am I? Because a lot of people don't want to face that either. So that's important to understand, that we want to face, those issues because we want you better and you want to get better. And I think, again, one of those things that you can do out there, PDI Self Assessment, start with that. That'll help you ask the right questions. If you've got some trainers out there with you, do the self-assessment on the Junior Golf Hub, and then you can actually go to your trainers that you're working with and ask, hey, what about this? How's this affecting this? So you also have to have the right questions too.
Sure.
I think that's really important.
Eric Cressy is a world-renowned trainer in the baseball world, big shoulder guy, and he's always says you can't judge the efficacy of a program unless you stick to the program. Right? So you can't tell whether or not a program's working or not unless you truly commit to what it's asking you to do, and then you can judge it.
So speaking of that, and I know one of the things that we talk about, we're in the Northeast, snow belt, seasonality, obviously it changes, but there's other places in the country that doesn't have kind of this built-in, off season, if you will. What should other athletes do around the country that may have some of these issues, but they're playing year-round? They're in Florida, they're in Texas, Southern California, places that they're playing year-round. Should they build in a
tough life? Huh?
Right.
You get to golf all year long. In fact, that probably is what drives people to those areas, to golf all year long. But again, overuse is inevitable. Of all the golf injuries, the statistics say that the more exposure, the more likely you get injured. So I say make yourself an off season. Tell yourself, I'm going to take a break. The way we do it is, golf, you can talk more about how golf goes back to basics. But to do that, if you're a kid, get another sport. I mean, time to change. A lot of the high-level athletes out there are actually multi-season sports instead of specializing early. And we find a lot of youth athletes with injuries that specialize too soon and go too hard.
Well, we see that all the time in golf. It's one of the reasons here, we talk about just introducing them to other sports, making sure, they have, multiple sports going. And to a certain point, obviously you got to prioritize at one point or some point, and usually that's somewhere about high school or so that you're prioritizing. But at the same time, to your point, I think it is really important that you get out there and experience different sports, because you never know which one you're going to find that you're going to excel at. And it may not be golf. You may be a young golfer, but you may do something else. And we've had that experience here where I've had young golfers come in who end up being NHL hockey picks, which is kind of crazy. But cool. It's happening as we're developing young athletes.
Totally. We talk so much about the athletic foundation neurologically, back to the mind connection behind this whole thing. Playing those other sports are going to benefit your golf game. So say your love of the game is golf. We hope it is. But in playing baseball, playing tennis, playing hockey, playing soccer, all of these sports are going to benefit your endeavor to improve your golf mechanics and your awareness as you train as a golf athlete as well.
Yeah, that's great. So in conclusion of this episode on mind and body and efficient off-season workout, what would be your best advice to the audience, Dr. Campbell?
Overuse injuries happen, so avoid them by prehabbing, getting your assessment so you can identify the things that you need to work on to avoid that. But also listen and respect your body. Pain is telling you, hey, there is potential tissue damage here. Fix it before it becomes a problem. Don't be afraid to speak up. A lot of these overuse injuries in young athletes are because they're pushing themselves. They don't know how to self-regulate. So respect your body, tell your parent, tell a coach, tell a trainer that something's up, give yourself some time off. I know there's got to be pressure out there to keep going. Come on, you're almost done. The season's almost over. But you're only going to make things drag out and longer if you don't respect what's going on.
Sure. That's great. Tyler, any closing comments?
I guess, what I would say first and foremost is I would challenge everyone watching to incorporate a physical game plan into your golf development. I think that's first and foremost. I know the tide is turning and that's changing in the game, and it's trickling down as the highest level players in the world are they can't ignore it at this point. It's playing a significant role in the game. So I would challenge you as junior golf athletes to absolutely develop a solid physical game plan that incorporates in assessing, not guessing, and making sure that you have an idea what you need to be working on, when you need to be working on it, and just staying solid with your commitment to it.
Awesome. That's great. Great advice, and thank you so much for sharing that information with the audience, Dr. Campbell, and obviously to always Tyler and the physical side of things. But yeah, make sure that you're bringing it every day. Get out there, get your workouts in, get your golf in, stay healthy, move well, move often. I think that's coined by Gray Cook.
Mr. Gray Cook, there you
FMS.
go.
So again, thanks so much. Andrew, do we have some questions coming up, or do we have any questions coming in?
We do. The first question is, how should I motivate myself to condition and not slack off during the off season?
Love it. Have fun. That would be my first. That would be my first response. There is, it's easy to get into the kind of the monotonous traditional gym workouts, or make it a game. You could also do it with a buddy or a friend, and push yourself. I think having metrics to work towards, so goals to work towards, is going to keep you a little more short-sighted in the big picture goal, right? So you're going to have something to work towards. You're going to be able to cross that off the list if you achieve it. But yeah, I think first and foremost, we want this to be fun.
Yeah, get in a good environment.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even doing another sport for a season is a good way to have fun and then build some of those fundamentals. And also, then you find something you love, or you're like, you know what? I'm glad I tried it. I love golf, and you come back. And doesn't that help us with the burnout?
Sure. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
the worst fear, is that we're training these kids who are awesome, and they're destined to be excellent, and they're like, I don't like this anymore.
Yeah.
So we don't want that to happen.
Yeah. Good.
The next question is, I live in a warm climate. Should I play golf in the off season?
Well, like we just said, I would say give yourself time to step away from the game, just ever so slightly. Listen, we practice golf year round. It's how we practice golf, and I think our golf coaches, Dennis can comment next week maybe, but would say that the focus in the winter or in the off season, whenever that might be for you, is the physical side. They really, really support us, and that makes my job a lot easier, but they really put a lot of emphasis and focus on getting the athletes stronger, giving them time to dedicate to that, while still continuing to, improve different areas of their golf game as well. So I would say, try to build in small breaks here and there.
Well, it's the idea of what are you doing? What's the intent of the play? So sometimes you're playing for tournaments, sometimes you're playing for just recreation.
Sure.
Break it down into I want to go out and have fun, and I'm not worried about the result of the score. There's an intention of development during your off season, so you're incorporating things that you want to change in your golf swing. So just make sure that you have the right intention when you're going out there, and that usually kind of breaks it up as well. So. Good question.
Another question is, do you recommend continuing workouts during a tournament? And do PGA Tour players work out during their tournaments?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
I would say yes. Yes and yes. I think the definition of workout is oftentimes misconstrued. Not always. There's been articles written about Brooks Koepka, Rory McIlroy, these guys doing trap bar deadlifts and bench press before
heavy
their
lifts.
workout. I would say every person, every body is going to respond differently. I think you're going to have to find what works for you. I think the majority of tour players will be in the trailer getting treatment, getting stretched out, getting proper warm-ups in, kind of what we refer to as more of our active rest day stuff, where we're working on overall function and activation of certain muscle groups. That is essentially a workout. Your body is waking up, your nervous system is waking up. There's benefits to doing so while in competition. I think I would say let's just I wouldn't say don't try it, but maybe be careful.
Well, it's kind of like what we talk about is our dynamic warm-up. Doing that,
sure.
I mean, that physical dynamic warm-up is like a workout for some people.
Right.
But if you haven't been working out, don't just because you heard somebody do it and then go do it, because it's going to be adverse effects there. Afterwards you're going to be sore and different things. So I would say if you're not already actively doing something, just don't jump into it.
I think
go through the process.
We talk about the off season. The off season might be a good opportunity to try some different methods, so say this, I've got a tournament coming up, I'm going to go through a good hour-long, foam roll, dynamic warm-up, active stretch prior to my event. Let's see how I feel.
Yeah.
And then listen to your body for the response, and that's how you know 100%. If it's appropriate or not. So you may not feel it then, but the next day you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm so sore. 1 day of soreness, fine. 2 days of soreness, 3 days, that was too much. Sure. So now you're loading the body too much and you're predisposing it to potential injury. But if you keep at it at that 1-2 days soreness level, it'll be 1 day. It'll be less. And when it's 0, it's time to increase. But when you get to those athletes who are in tournament play, they're doing their workouts that don't make them sore because they're in a maintenance phase. Mm-hmm. It may be incredibly hard compared to what we can handle, but we know that their bodies can handle it.
I would say it comes back to just that method would just come back to the expectations for that event, right? And I think setting proper expectations for that particular event is important. Yeah.
Any other questions, Andrew?
That's all the questions we have.
All right. Well, thanks for those questions. Keep them coming. We want to make sure, again, we're helping you guys on and off the golf course. So your feedback is going to help us make this show better for you. So make sure let's keep coming. Now, do we have a pop quiz winner?
We do have a pop quiz winner. It is Thomas Bopp.
Thomas Bopp.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Thomas Bopp, you get this great hat. Junior Golf Club hat. So thanks for participating and sending in your answers. So thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. As always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Junior Golf Hub. Again, remember to download that app. Go take your PDI Self Assessment. Get that information in there. Get some feedback for yourself. What do you need to do to kind of keep your college journey going? And maybe go to that next level and take the coach guided assessment, and then maybe come to a college prep series and get the full assessment. That would be a great thing to do. Again, also connecting to the college coaches, that app will get all those college coaches right there in your pockets and find the right fit for you. And as always, Ethan Allen Preparatory, achieving your greatness in the classroom, on the golf course, and in life. So check it out when you get a chance. So thanks so much for those sponsors. And before we leave, I want to talk about next week's show. So we're really going to be talking about kind of the efficiency of off-season golf training. Now that we've talked about the body and the mind, but now we're going to talk about the mind and golf and how that works, and maybe have Dr. Brandt and Dennis back on the show and talking more about that and how to train in the off season. So again, as always, thanks for tuning in. Love to see you next week. We don't know what day it's going to be on next week, but we'll let you know shortly. So thanks so much for stopping in. As always, enjoy your journey and get after it.